Good morning. I'd like to answer a few questions. One was about how do we change the system? We're living in the Matrix, in Babylon, a system of slavery, a system where we're reinforced to be mean to ourselves and mean to others so that we never achieve happiness. So how do we break out of this? We be our higher self. We meditate, we learn from ourselves, we correct ourselves. Most importantly, we correct ourselves. We look at what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and we identify what's working and what's not. And we be real with ourselves. We be kind of edgy with ourselves. We don't need to be mean to ourselves, but we need to take this seriously and say, okay, is this behavior serving me, or is this behavior an echo from something that's not serving me? It's fully fine to identify something that's not working about me, realize that it's not me, and say, I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm going to, bring this out of my life. When it happens, I'm going to call it out from myself and say, oh, this is when this is happening. It's probably from this. It's not helping me anymore. It may be hurting me. So I'm going to replace this with not doing it. I'm actively, as I notice it, I'm going to actively replace it with not it, anything else. So we escape the Matrix and we help other people by being ourselves. There's kind of a fine line of intuition. We can really study from other people who do this really well because it's such a fine line between standing our ground and walking away and flowing, because sometimes there's a situation in which standing our ground is just going to create more conflict. So we need to be able to see how flexible people are. We need to be able to listen for those moments when people are receptive and just try to be fairly consistent and gentle and even most of the time. But when we're around other people, we do want to be finding ways to broadcast our messages in ways that will be received. So eating, for example, I eat super healthy. I've done this. My body is really sensitive to food for my whole life, so I've learned how to eat really carefully. So I eat salad, and I eat very little. I don't eat it until like 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and I eat very lightly, a piece of fruit or a very small salad. And just by doing this every day, everybody at my work and everybody who has lived with me and my friends all know that I eat very little and I eat very light and that I have a lot of energy and that I'm very strong. So simply by showing that I don't need to eat much food and I don't need to eat a bunch of protein and I can still have a lot of muscle mass and I still have a lot of clarity and energy, we can kind of start to tear down the matrix this way. We can say, well, I don't care how many calorie countings you do and how many numbers games you play and how many diet classes you've taken or books you've read, but I can eat salad and fruit and I can gain muscle and I can feel great. I can sleep 5 or 6 hours a night and that's all I need. I'm just always excited to wake up and fall asleep easily. So just by being our authentic, genuine self and pushing our authentic, genuine self to new heights, we always want to be improving. We always want to be saying, okay, what is holding me back next? Maybe I still have a reaction when I'm in a situation where people project onto me. They're not able to see a comprehensive view of reality with me in it, and so they have to use a limiting belief, and so they're trying to limit who I am based on their belief. So that can still kind of trigger me, but what I can do is I can simultaneously create space for this and say, okay, this person is at their limits. They are not able to comprehend anything more than what they're comprehending. How can I drop a clue that they're missing something? How can I just be an example of how they're wrong? I don't have to try to make them wrong. I don't have to try to do anything. But if someone is projecting a limiting belief on me and I can simply show that that's not true, they're going to try everything they can to try to make it true. And eventually they're going to start doing ridiculous things. And so this is where it's helpful to have a second or a third or a fourth person around, because the person who's doing it is just attached to their perception, attached to their projection. But if there's someone else there saying, hey, wait a second, why are you being aggressive towards that guy? Why are you being demanding towards that guy? You seem like you have a problem. So again, perspective, finding the right moments, finding other people that can act as translators. The most helpful thing we can do is find someone who gets who we are and isn't quite there yet, but is also able to translate who we are to other people because they have more mainstream credibility. They play the system well, and so they can both see outside the system a little further than most people, but they're also able to communicate with other people in the system because they're still so intertwined into the slave system. They want to get out, and they're making steps to get out, but they're still playing the game. So other people playing the game aren't immediately suspicious. conscious of someone who's not playing the game. More than half the problems in my life have come from people recognizing that I'm not playing the game and getting mad at me because this is Mr. Smithing. This is agents of the Matrix saying, hey, you're not playing the slave game, get back in line. It'll surface from anyone, anywhere who does not have a really high level of consciousness. It'll act on a trigger of saying, hey, you're expressing freedom. We are not allowed to have freedom. How dare you? I'm going to unleash all my rage at you. I'm going to try to trip you. I'm going to try to manipulate you. I'm going to try to get other people to be mean to you because you're acting free. No acting free. So this is called a Mr. Smith, Mr. Smithing. Authority agents, security forces, and police are basically trained to be Mr. Smiths, just to train to cut out bad behavior. Bad behavior being genuine and being honest, being truthful, being caring, being loving, showing genuine emotion. These are all not acceptable in the slave system. But anyone can be a Mr. Smith. Like in the Matrix movie, literally anybody who's not at a high enough level of consciousness can be, all of a sudden you can watch them be who they are, and you can then watch them suddenly transform into someone who's very angry and very determined to find fault, very determined to cause hurt, very determined to not accept what's happening and to create a very static reality around them and try to enforce this reality to the point where they will defy logic. They will start saying things that contradict the last things that they said, and they will very defensive. So again, having multiple people around us. The other aspect of this is that the sacrificial lamb, another part of the Matrix, the slave training that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years, is that if someone starts to speak the truth and be genuine and be honest and loving and caring too much, then it's a sacrificial lamb principle where everybody collectively says, uh-oh, our egos are being attacked. We're under attack. There's someone who's genuine and we're fake. We live in our ego body and we're afraid. This is all unconscious. No one's consciously thinking these thoughts. That would be kind of crazy. But everybody's feeling intuitively, I'm under attack, because people are living in their ego. And so if they see and experience someone who's not in their ego, they immediately, the ego seeks to defend itself and seeks to shift blame, because they see all of a sudden they're shallow and superficial, and there's someone who's taking on other people's pain and transmuting it, and that terrifies them. It terrifies unconsciously their ego, and so they will literally join together and say, oh, look, that guy's wrong because of this. Oh, yeah, he's wrong because of this. Oh, yeah, let's all get together and tell this person how wrong they are, because we are all Mr. Smithing. We are all very unconscious, and we want to suppress any form of freedom. I'm sure this is represented in the Matrix too, where you have mobs of Mr. Smiths running after one guy or one small group of people. Again, this has been used throughout history. Pythagoras, who predates Socrates, Pythagoras, this happened to his disciples all the time. He was so much about truth and honesty and discovering what it means to be present. He was a wise sage who resolved wars all the time. He was world renowned, but he was very controversial. No organized power structure wanted him around for too long. They wanted his help because he was amazing, but they didn't want him around for too long because they knew that he represented natural law, and that most forms of power, enforced power, are not based on natural law. So Pythagoras, again, if you want to look up Pythagoras, there's I think it's called the naderlibrary.org, has a free copy of the collected works of Pythagoras, written by someone who doesn't really believe in Pythagoras, very strange, and is often pointing out the contradictions, but it's still a wealth of information of all the available texts from Pythagoras. He was a mystic, a teacher of a mystery school. The only recorded documents are from students who became broke and needed some money and sold some of what they remembered, but technically there shouldn't be any written records of his work. He's amazing. Again, Socrates, Plato's The Republic is based on Socrates meeting Pythagoras once. One of Socrates' most brilliant, most renowned works is based on Pythagoras' influence on Socrates. So Socrates is really much less than Pythagoras. Pythagoras gave us the Pythagorean theorem, but that's really much less than all the other things he gave us. He didn't believe in math unless it could be physically represented through pictures. So, the Pythagorean theorem came one aspect of his brilliance in mathematics, but he was really more into sacred geometry, sound, meditation, contemplation, the nature of justice and civilization. He was on some big stuff. Anyway, so I wanted to go over that topic a little bit, talking about being genuine and the difficulty we can have around that. I also wanted to talk about food. Someone was asking about how eating really clean and what that has to do with spirituality. So as far as I've been able to determine, we are beings with limitless potential, and one of our potentials is that we don't need food. We see the yogis from India, they have their digestive system is almost devoid, almost not there, and their lungs are huge. That means that they feed themselves from prana, from both oxygen, and there's a lot in what we call air. There's a lot of things there that we don't have scientific names for because we can't see, but in the ether there's a lot of life force, and certain breath patterns allow us to absorb that life force as well as the oxygen. The oxygen is great too. So we can train ourselves to absorb more chi and prana from breath techniques, more oxygen, and work with our bodies absorbing sunlight. We need to retrain our bodies to really feed off of starlight and sunlight and moonlight, because these things will really feed us. Virtually all life except for the fungal kingdom is based on sunlight. So sunlight is really the key. Sunlight, fresh air, clean water, I think is considered the stepping stone. This is the final piece. When we've gotten ourselves off of food, when we no longer need to eat food, water is still something that we can transition onto, but eventually we don't even need water. Just sunlight and fresh air is pretty much all we need. So the way we do this is by identifying our emotions. This is all about self-review, self-accountability, emotional transmutation, shadow work, whatever you want to call that stuff. It's all about clarifying ourselves to the point where we don't really have resentment or anger, and we resolve it very quickly. We don't hold on to anything. This doesn't mean we get over it and don't feel it anymore. This means we actively resolve it. We know where we are with it. So when we still have this issue, it might not be 100% resolved, but it's so close to being resolved, and we're dealing with it all the time that it's not taking up any extra space. We're not storing it. It may be a recurring pattern that has a little instance in our being, but we have a mechanism so that it's not bothering us. When we get to this point with virtually everything, then we'll notice that food is a habit. Eating is a habit. It's not necessary. It can be very enjoyable, but as one of my teachers said, there are 3 primary things that prevent us from ascending once we're on the spiritual path, and that is mental chatter, food, and pleasure. He was very clear on this list of things. I was asking him, you have all these techniques of how you heal people from cancer and how you do all these amazing things. And I said, well, which techniques are going to be best for me? And he just said, you meditate a lot. You're really good at what you do. Just remember these 3 things. You'll be fine. So I translate that to mean attachment to mental chatter, attachment to food, and attachment to pleasure. So we can have mental chatter and be like, oh, my mind's chattering, be quiet, and it gets quiet. And then we can say, oh, I need to solve a problem for this. I'm going to solve a problem for this. So this is we're not attached to our mental chatter. It's not like, oh, well, that person said that. I wonder what he meant by that. Or, oh, that tree looks beautiful. Or, oh, there's construction on the side of the road. I wonder when that's going to be done. This is mental chatter that takes up space in our brain. Most people's brains are entirely filled with mental chatter like this, inconsequential in the greater picture, very minutely consequential in its own reality. But generally, which flavor ice cream do I like and which song do I like on the radio and what am I going to tell people at work this morning have very little consequence on anything and are considered mental chatter. Food, attachment to food. So we generally only need to eat one small meal a day, if at all. This can take work and training and figuring out what kinds of food we really need and our relationship with our emotions. But generally we can just play with eating less, trying fasting, just not eating for half a day. I encourage people to try a health fast, which means find the one food that you think is the worst for you that you eat and don't eat it for a day, and find some foods that you think are the best for you, or find a new kind of food that you know is really good for you and eat that every day for a week. I think we should try adding celery to our diet every day for a week before we should really consider any kind of fasting or cleansing, because self-control, controlling what we eat, we really need to focus on the quality stuff we're putting in our body before we're focusing on not just trying to put less into our body. We want to reach a state of balance. It's great if you feel compelled to do a fast, then that's great too, but consistency, that same teacher that told about the attachment also said that fasting once a week is really a good idea, at least once a month, but once a week is great because it lets the body reset. We intellectually and spiritually and emotionally in all our bodies get a chance to recalibrate when we don't eat, because digesting attaches to a lower density vibration. Every time we eat, our vibration is brought down, and that's not such a horrible thing, but we really want to be conscious of this. if I'm eating celery and apples, my vibration isn't really being brought down much. A little bit to digest, but this is such high vibrational food. It's such light. It's so full of enzymes and life that it's not bringing me down a whole lot. Maybe the excess fiber in the celery, I usually string some of that fiber out because that can bring me down a little bit. But we don't really need to eat. We can play with eating lighter and less food. There's a great infographic that's going around Facebook that shows someone eating everything and being kind of overweight, having very little connection to source through their crown chakra. Removing meat from their diet, all of a sudden looking a little bit brighter, a little bit thinner and lighter and happier, and then removing the diversity and quantity from the diet. So we're just eating a few simple things that we know are good for us. And then all of a sudden when we do that, when we're eating very little and very good stuff, we all of a sudden have like a direct contact. We all of a sudden are downloading our higher self all the time because the density of our food, the unconsciousness of our food isn't weighing us down, our cells down, our energetic being and our physical matter down. So that's a great state to be in. And then as we go from there, we go to realizing that we don't need 3 or 4 meals a day. We only need a very small amount of food. So we're eating very selective, high vibrational, alive foods, very little of it, being very conscious of our emotions and processing our emotions and not eating when we feel. Again, this is the biggest thing, is that when we feel and we feel the need to eat, that's how we tell that it's emotionally driven. And then we'll eventually get to the point where we're just barely eating. Again, this is like, if we're choosing to include diet as part of our ascension process, we don't have to, but it's a great one. I find that meditation is easy when I'm eating very little. So we'll transition into just like having a few stalks of celery and an apple throughout the day, maybe like a little bit of tahini. Tahini is really sustaining. So tahini and celery I find is a whole meal for me. And we'll eventually get to the point where we just need liquids, where we don't even need solid food anymore, where we've resolved our emotional stuff, we're able to help everyone around us, we figured out what we need and what our boundaries are, so we're not taking on anything that we don't want to, so we're able to process everything that we're being given. And then we just, liquids. We're still attached to having fluids running through the body, but when we get to the point where we've transmuted everything, where we've just to the point where anything new comes up and we're so into our game that we transmute it as soon as it's coming up and we don't have anything attached to us, then we don't need anything. We are a closed system. Our body does not need food or liquid at this point. So we basically just need to get, even sunlight and fresh air. There's stories of yogis being locked up by their politicians for like a month and not having, and going on fasts and being like, I'm not going to eat because I didn't do anything wrong, and they locked me up because I'm spiritual and because I'm helping people, and they say I'm not going to eat. So they get thinner and thinner and thinner. They're 14 days into no eating and no drinking, and they're just sitting there and meditating, and they got like a gentle smile on their face. This isn't. It's definitely a very specific path. So I don't say that everybody has to do this, but everybody can benefit from taking the first step or two of the diet for ascension process, because I'm not going to say it's really bad to eat meat, but I will talk a little bit about how we live in a world where we have choice, and the fact that we don't need to eat meat and we choose to eat meat should make us think a little bit. We should just start thinking about this concept. If we don't need to kill another mammal, but we want to eat its flesh, we should just consider this for a little bit. There's no judgment around this. It's a maturity thing. We get to a certain level of spiritual maturity when we decide, I have figured out what food I need to sustain me, and I no longer want to engage in an industry which kills other mammals so that I can eat meat. Meat is unnecessary. I think even Arnold Schwarzenegger said that he, became a vegetarian when he got to see how much money it costs to raise a cow, and how much damage it costs to the environment, and how much damage it costs to that mammal's life, like how horrible the average cow's life is that's going to be killed. Arnold Schwarzenegger said he became a vegetarian. Now, I don't know if that's true. He might have just made that up. But the fact that he's, going to make a public statement about that says that he saw the data and he read some reports and he's like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. Again, someone who's, known for being a bodybuilder, known for being, acting tough. So again, high testosterone, huge muscles. We know we don't really need meat for that. There's also a couple people in the health industry who are vegan and super healthy. I am not pushing myself to an extreme in this industry, but I don't even think I need protein that much anymore. I used to think I did. I still think I need a little bit, but I've been playing with this whole keto theory, and it seems to work pretty well. I don't subscribe to whole other ideas like fad diets, but keto incorporates a number of really good ideas. It's partial fasting, virtually no carbohydrates, limited sugars, nutrient dense, healthy fats, lots of fresh food, small meals. Like it's pretty smart. It's pretty logical. If it covers a lot of bases, it draws from a lot of different systems. I wouldn't follow it exclusively because eating a lot of nuts and seeds, especially if they're not organic or sprouted, will eventually cause huge amounts of inflammation and problems. So we don't want to just jump to an extreme with this and try to catch up on our protein by eating a bunch of nuts and seeds or just eating huge amounts of fat. But it is better than any other diet that I've seen. I don't follow diets. I learn what they have to tell me. And the keto diet, I'm almost half on the keto diet, not even trying, because it's just naturally what I've followed with my evolution. So that's a little bit about that. I know there's a couple people in the Greater Bay Area who don't eat, who live on air and sunlight. So that's great to hear that there's some people locally that do this. And like I was saying before, if I weigh very little, I feel lighter and I feel more connected. I don't feel as grounded into this earth. I don't feel as much in the 3D plane. So every once in a while, because I'm still learning, I'm still growing, every once in a while, if I know I need to be in a low-density environment and I need to be interacting in a very real way with a lot of low-density energies, sometimes I will eat something a little bit. I'm not going to eat something bad, but I might eat like some cooked food, or I might eat something a little more solid, or make sure to have plenty of nuts with my meal to ground me out. It'll lower my vibration a little bit. It'll solidify me and ground me into this plane a little bit more. It'll lower my vibration a little bit, but that'll also help me match up a little bit, because when I'm in super high vibe, there's a tendency to just not want to say anything at all, because I can see how nothing I say is going to really, make a difference. That most often, if I'm dealing with low vibrations, it's projection and blindness. So basically, it's other people are going to project their reality onto me and not be able to see what I'm saying, no matter what I say, because they're attached to what they're projecting. So it's a fine line. Sometimes just lower my vibration enough so that I'm not having quite as many intuitions about what's happening, and I can just be emotionally present to remind myself, just be in my body, be emotionally pleasant, guide this as an emotional experience, because I know logically that there's nothing going to happen intellectually. So we can play with our diets this a little bit, but really clarifying ourselves. We're trying to enlighten ourselves, clarify. We're trying to discover and create space. And so these metaphors apply over to eating. We don't really need to eat so much. We want to really focus. Berries especially are great. Celery is especially great. Just going to the health food store and just checking out new vegetables and new fruits and finding new things that you might like. I love going to large farmers markets that have exotic fruits. Jujubes are Chinese fruit that are really medicinal and taste really amazing. Japanese sweet potatoes are one of my favorite foods. They're like candy, and I need so little of it, and I feel so wonderful. Okay, so that is a little bit about diet. Drink lots of warm water in the morning. It's best to flush our systems out. This is my whole strategy. I've been doing this for years. I try to down a lot of warm water throughout the morning. It also makes it very easy to fast if I'm just filling myself with warm water, and I really like herbal tea. I've been an herbalist for a number of years. I make my own tea blends. I usually put some detoxifying stuff, some anti-inflammatories, some adaptogens. I make a nice blend. I kind of rotate through different herbs, so I'm never getting stuck on the same herbs and getting too familiar with them. But there's all kinds of herbs for energy, relaxation, nervous system support, brain function, immunity. There's just there's herbs for everything. There's like a dozen or 100 herbs for everything. So I can rotate through the different herbs. That's great. All right. Well, I love the fact that people are asking questions. I love to go into more detail. I love to hear what people want to hear more about. So please keep asking questions in the comments below. Please send any requests. Let me know if you like this kind of stuff, answering questions, talking about the nature of reality. Let me know if you want me to talk more about about escaping the matrix and the individual tangible steps we can take for that. Let me know if you want me to do just more meditation broadcasts. I can get back to doing some more of that. I've been thinking about doing separate kind of satsang downloads and meditation. So let me know what you think about that, doing them separate. But for right now, I have just another minute, and I'll go into a quick Gayatri. Savidorarenyam Bargo Devasya Dimahi Dhyayana Prachodayat Bhubarasvaha Tat 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 Savidorarenyam Bargo Devasya Dimahi Dhyayana Prachodayat Shanti Shanti Shanti. And that's followed with the 3-part breath, 5 or 10 seconds inhale, 5 or 10 seconds hold, and really relax around the hold and let your body sag around your lungs. 5 or 10 seconds exhale, very slow and controlled. Keep practicing different forms of the controlled exhale until you feel that really intense relaxation where the whole back of your neck just calms down. Feel bliss waves rolling through you. Really, that exhale is where it's all at. All right, have a wonderful morning, and leave questions below. Goodbye.